Okay, so I want to explain a little bit about homework 4, and then so you can start looking at this. So I redefine homework 4 from the spring quarter, at least partially. So this part is part 1 of homework 4, which is a good part. I think is a good for you to learn what is the as a programmer, regardless you're a C or C++ programmer, how you managing the array is actually very important. So I'm still keeping it here, but this one is you really, if you don't really have time, you don't need to do anything. But if you have time, I think it's a good exercise for you to learn. So this is basically tell you the difference if you define the array, two-dimensional array, which is array is very important, especially this day we're talking about processing large amount of data. And you will be surprised that this data usually got represented as an array. For example, you talk about machine learning or AI, it's pretty much handling all the array, essentially. It's calculating the matrix one way or the other. So, but the thing is that this is surprising that it's still an array, but the code is just defined somewhat differently. It essentially switched this two array indices from ij to ji. And it creates a huge performance difference. It's like almost 6 times difference if you time it. Okay, so this homework assignment is actually just have you to understand that part. But I feel that I included there, but it's a zero credit, means that it's your option whether you want to have time to look at this part, and also you don't need to submit anything for this one. Okay, this is just part 1 for you too. I have all the information here that you can play around. Okay, all right. The homework 2, the homework 4 part 2 is identical to the homework 4 or part 2 from spring 2020. So if you look at the video, it's talk about homework 4 part 2. It is this part. It's essentially let you to know the memory layout between multiple inheritance and the virtual inheritance. And this part is I would say is a C++ specific issue related to inheritance in object-oriented programming. I do want to say that I didn't play a lot of material related to multiple inheritance in the object-oriented programming because this is maybe my personal opinion, is that multiple inheritance complicate a lot of things, both for programming, both for runtime support, as you can see from this assignment, and also conceptually, multiple inheritance, if not being used carefully, is actually a source of problem to a large scale project. Because essentially, if you open the door of multiple inheritance, when you actually inherit something from both ends, you don't know what other things beyond the class you just inherited, and also the interference between multiple inheritance, because you inherit 2 parents. And so there are functions that seem to be some of the function processing one parent, some of the function handled by the other parent, and maybe there are some interference unintentionally, which is usually conceptually harder to debug. That's why in my recommendation, if you can handle the problem with single inheritance, you should just use single inheritance. That's why this homework assignment is try to give you a concept to understand multiple inheritance. The second thing about this homework assignment is that C++, because it's using virtual function, a virtual table, it creates some differences in terms of memory management. If you want to doing some kind of memory optimization, and sometimes this might surprise you because your imagination about your memory allocation might be very different from the runtime. this exercise is trying to have you do that. Okay, so this part, as I declare, is exactly the same as the spring 2020, and so you can probably dig out all the all the material that how to work on this part. But we will still cover some of that in this time period. Just make sure that you have any question regarding from the recorded lecture or the earlier Zoom session. If there is still something unclear, let us know. Okay. So what I really want to talk about is the part 3. Okay, it's a part 3 of homework 4. So what I did here is that this part, in some sense, is new, but in some sense, conceptually, is similar to your next homework assignment, so homework assignment number 5. That's why I call it preparation. So let me actually tell you why this time I decide to take apart at least some part of homework 5 into homework 4 earlier. Because homework 5 is a very complicated homework assignment. It essentially wants you to do a conversion. To do a conversion from the C++ object to JSON object as a one-to-one. So you think about, we have been learning how to define a C++ class or object from chapter 11, 12, 13, 14, those 4 major chapters. And you can, I think by now you should have some idea about how to define any kind of object you would like to define, especially if we only worry about single inheritance. All right, so that's the C++ world. But on the other hand, you have seen that the JSON world is really rich. It's rich because it's not just a data format, but also the associated application and the library around this data format. So essentially, you can see that C++, you know what it is, but JSON is really impact every single segment of our system. You're actually dealing with JSON. So if you think about that, a JSON is an object. So a JSON is an object. It's just an object without the member function. It is an object without private member as well. So everything is public, but if you take away the difference between public and private, you take away the member function and member, and JSON is essentially a concatenation of any kind of object you would like to represent in C++. You can actually represent in JSON. So let me repeat it again. This is very important. Anything you can represent in C++, that you can actually represent, I'm talking about the information part, not the processing part. You can actually represent in JSON. What does that mean? That means that if I can do this representation, then I can do this one-to-one mapping. So it means that if I have a C++ object, that I will be able to convert that to a JSON, and such that then I can actually send this object to any program or any system that understands JSON, and they can do whatever they're processing. And one of the possibilities is that if I want to send, say, some of us may be in the other side of the world, that I actually want to send you a C++ object. So what I can do is I convert my C++ object to JSON, and I send the JSON all the way to the other side of the earth. And the other side of earth, they are actually taking a reverse process. They actually turn that JSON and translate into a C++ object. So now you have essentially an object mobility. You're moving one of your objects in C++ to the other part. Okay, that's one way of thinking about using this kind of conversion from C++ to JSON and then to C++. And the other way about thinking about JSON, think about file system and persistent object. So you think about, okay, I have a C++ object. Today, you control C, you kill your program. Your object is gone, basically. And next time you have to rerun your program or enter all the input, you can get your object back, right? But one of the ways you can think about JSON is that I can actually convert my C++ object into JSON. And what I did is that I actually saved the JSON to a file or to a database. So it's a JSON in the database is what we, in fact, JSON database, sometimes we call it NoSQL. That's another kind of format we use the term. So now when you want to run your program again, the easier ways is just to reload that JSON that you store in the database and you convert it back to C++. Now you have a live C++ object as if you were running last time before it ended, okay? So that's the concept we will ask you to target it in homework 5. It has a capability to actually convert a JSON to a C++ and also convert C++ to JSON. So essentially you have a two-way street between these two worlds. And that capability is not just about being able to connect these two worlds, but that actually, I found that exercise really deepening your understanding about both C++ and the JSON and object-oriented programming. So you can actually think about you understand two different formation about the same concept, and you can do the translation between these two. You actually know, you have to know both sides really well to do that. And the thing is that is going to give you that experience. So homework 5 is I consider it a very valuable experience for any object-oriented programming. If you want to really be doing a serious object-oriented programming in the future, after you graduate, that this kind of experience is extremely valuable. Okay, having said that, you can see that that's actually quite challenging. If you want to do this conversion because you're just learning one C++ up to this point, and you learn a little bit about JSON, and now I'm going to try to ask you to actually convert this two worlds. Of course, it could be challenging. I mean, the one trick about handle this is you need to use a lot of library. Don't try to, brute force, try to solve this problem. There is a lot of strategy which we will cover during this homework 5. So you learn that strategy to do that in a much smoother way. But even that, I found I want to break that homework 5 into two parts. So I actually take out I consider a much simpler part of homework 5 into part 3 of homework 4. So what this is doing is that I'm actually just give you two classes. That these two classes I'm going to define, which this classes in homework 5 will be a lot more complicated, but right now we just focus on this two. In fact, I would say if you can handle this two and with recursion, so you probably learned about the concept of recursion in ecs36b, and recursion is one of the challenging concepts for programming. I mean, usually if you can do recursion, that means you must understand the question really well to implement your recursion correctly. And this is an example that when you do JSON C++ handling, that you need to do recursion. If you think about JSON, you could have a multiple layer of information within a JSON, and therefore you need to really exercise your capability to do recursion in order to solve the problem correctly. So that's in homework 5. For homework 4, we try to take only two classes, so the recursion cannot be too deep. In fact, it's a recursion of just two layers. Okay, so it should be much easier for you to do. And more specifically, I'm going to give you two classes. One is called reaction, one is called comment. Okay, let me explain to you what is a reaction, what's comment. So if somebody actually posts something on Facebook or Twitter, and you can actually make a comment, right? You can make a comment. You say, oh, this is great, congratulations, or condolence, or oh, what a great game. Okay, you can make some comments on the Facebook. So that's the class comment that try to capture that concept. And what's reaction? Once you put a comment, somebody can click a like, somebody click a love, angry. That's reaction. So we're talking about just looking at two classes. I'm going to give it to you with reaction and the comments. And what we need to do is what we require you to implement is a function called DumpJ. DumpJ is basically take the C++ class and output a JSON that's represent the information being contained in this particular class its member function is. So for example, I should have a DumpJ with reaction. Let me actually just take a look at the reaction. You can actually take a look at that. Let me go to my, where am I? Okay, here. Let me just go back to, let me go to reaction.h so you can see what it is. So here's a reaction that you're going to receive a code. And let's look at what is a reaction. It's just .h. I will give you the .cpp as well, except one part of .cpp, which is the DumpJ I want you to implement. Okay, so essentially, you have a reaction has a reaction type, right? Whether this is angry, this is love, or this is happy. And then reaction has a person, which is what you got from homework 2 and homework 3. It's a person object. And you have a JV time, basically is a time object. I'm going to give you that code as well, which is basically to talk about when was this reaction happen. It's recording the time. And this is just a reaction constructor with all the information. It's about type, person, and the JV time. And also, finally, we have this DumpJ. So what DumpJ is dumping all the, to convert all the information you have, which is essentially the type, author, and created, the three fields, into a JSON string, and then not JSON string, return a JSON object, which is JSON value star. It's a pointer to a JSON value object. So that's what DumpJ is doing. Okay, so that is for a reaction. And I want to show you the other one is comment. I mentioned comment. So I'm going to simplify this comment a little bit, but so far the comment might look complicated. For example, I'm going to remove the tag. I'm not going to ask you to do anything related to tag, because if you can handle reaction, tag is actually just a little bit more complicated about the tag. This is a general implementation. But let's look at the comment. The comment is having a profile ID, the post ID, comment ID, has an author, has a message, again, has a time. And it has, this is interesting, we already kind of tell you for homework 3, we're using array, but after homework 3, we should use a vector. So this is the first time I'm going to tell you about vector. I'm going to talk about vector. So basically, a comment could have a vector of reaction. So you can see that this is, okay, I said that you don't need to worry about the tag, okay? The tag is gone. You will not need to worry about the tag. But then you have a constructor, which is constructed this comment with all this information. And then you see you have a DumpJ. Again, a virtual function called DumpJ, and the DumpJ is essentially allow you to basically convert all the information within this comment and return a JSON object called JSON value. And you can print it out very nicely. So the difference between comment and reaction, why I picked this two. Reaction, what I just showed you, is actually quite simple because it's essentially a 3-key value pair, right? Let me just show you the difference. So if you look at reaction, it has only 3 attributes, which means that you will have a 3-value pair. The first key is type, and then what type it is. And the second key is person. Okay, I forgot to mention. To print the person, basically we print the VSID and the name. Okay, when we talk about a person, we just say who's the author, what's the VSID, what's the name. Just name and the VSID. So it's going to be an object, but include 2 parameters. And the third one is the JV time, which is the time string, which you actually start seeing in web reporting of homework 3. So it's just 3 of them, and you put these 3 things into a JSON, and then that's a JSON object, and then you have that done. Well, the comment part is a little bit more complicated. This part is the same. Author is just a person, which means the VSID and the name, and message is just a string, and time, JV time is just a time string, just like what you have up here. So far looks really simple, but the most complicated part is this one. It's a reaction. It's a reaction, but it's not just one reaction. It's a vector of reaction, because you can consider one of the posts might attract lots of people click like. I mean, just give you an example, talk about scale. When 2016, when the second debate between Clinton and Trump, on a particular social media, just one post attract about 400,000 comments and millions of reactions. So you can see that this could be a huge, but of course, for homework 4, you're looking at very small number of reaction. But it's a recursive concept, because you actually have a vector of reaction, and each of the reaction is actually going to be generated by the reactions DumpJ. So essentially, when you prepare the JSON, you're going to create an array. And each array element is actually going to be taken from the reaction.h, the DumpJ. So you have 2 DumpJ, but one is going to call the other. So that's kind of the recursion, but that's the way you can, I mean, I'm not actually asking you to do the other way. So we're talking about convert a C++ object to a JSON object only. And of course, later in homework 5, you're going to do the other way as well. I mean, because the other way is I would say a lot harder, but somewhat more things you need to consider. Okay, when you convert it back from JSON, convert it back to C++. But the principle is similar. Okay, so that's what we like you to work on for homework assignment 4, part 3, which is essentially provide a result. And then, of course, we're going to provide you a test drive. And that test drive will submit the JSON you created. It will submit to web report. And the web report will actually check the result. And this time, we're actually going to check whether your conversion is actually expected, because we're going to give you a test program which has the reaction and comments, so we know what the JSON object should look like. And then we'll actually compare what you generate. If it's successful, that means you have done a correct DumpJ program to do this conversion correctly. Okay, so I'm going to just since we're here, I just want to tell you, for this homework assignment, the hand-in is a little bit different. Is that you're going to still create a directory called homework 4. But under homework 4, you should actually create another layer of directory. You should create another directory called homework 4 part 2, which you put all your file there. But also you should create another subdirectory homework 4 part 3. So you will need to put the file related to this program into this directory respectively. And then when you hand in, you actually you still do this. You cd means you go to the parents, and then you still do this line to actually tar the whole thing, homework 4 together, and hand in you only have one file to hand in, but you have 2 subdirectory under the homework 4 directory, just to let you know that. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop here. Any question?
Professor?
Yes.
In the CSIF direction, it should be, oh, can you share the screen again? Sorry. So in the CSIF direction, in the first line, it should be fall 2020.
Sorry, you are right. Did I miss anything else? Yeah, it should, sorry about that. Yeah, it should be F 2020. Yeah, you should have one already, by the way, right? You should have one. The important thing is this line, you should already have it. From previous homework is really, this line is for homework 4. Okay, but thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Professor,
Go ahead, please.
oh yeah, sorry about that. I had
No
a
problem.
question about the homework itself. So, basically, the objective of this homework is to convert C++ to a JSON, a C++ object to a JSON object, right?
Right.
So, I was just wondering, so where do we begin? Like, do you have any videos that you recommend us to watch, or will you go over that in later classes?
I do have a video already talk about the general concept about conversion, and we'll also have a video to talk about the general case. So one of the things which I learned from my last quarter is that it might be too complicated, because I actually talk about, okay, you convert a very complicated C++ object directly to JSON. And that might be hard. So that video is in that sense doing that. So you might be able to get something out of that, but I like to leverage, for example, next class, I'm actually going to give you more idea about how to convert the concept into coding. So you see that right now, my style is always the first lecture talk about concept, the next lecture talk about more programming to help you to bridge the gap over there. I do intend to do this here. But the other thing I just let you know, if you watch this, the pre-recorded lecture or pre-recorded Zoom from the spring, related homework 5 is all related, but that is for much more complicated than the part 3 of homework 4. But what I learned is I like to let you chew on a smaller pieces first, and which will help you to get past this part easier, because the easier you can learn that, and then you upgrade yourself to work on a more complicated problem. That's my plan here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sure. The other thing I do want to tell you is that in general, this kind of conversion of C++ and JSON, let me explain this way. In general, of course, anything you have C++ object that you can actually convert to JSON, and any JSON I can actually represent C++. That statement is absolutely true. But the thing is that when you do the automation to do this conversion, it is really also depend on what is your object modeling. I mean, why I say that? For example, if I don't tell you the structure about the comments and the reaction, the comments and the reaction means that you have a comment object, that you have a reaction object that's actually being under a comment that people can click reaction. If you don't know that exactly that relationship in C++, and that will be really hard for you to do the conversion in the other side, because all I have is a data structure. I don't know whether this is just an array of basic type or array of structure type such as object. So when we do the conversion, while the data syntax is definitely swappable between these two worlds, but the semantic perspective about the object must be encoded somehow in the conversion process. And that is particularly true when you actually want to convert from the JSON back to C++. If you just convert C++ to JSON, I think the requirement is less, because JSON object is just the data. It doesn't have the method and doesn't have other thing like a pointer or all the relationship. So that's why when you convert it back, you have to need more knowledge, which we will cover later. That sometimes complicate things a little bit. But in your for homework 4, hopefully you don't need to worry about that. So that's why homework 4, we just try to get you started by doing the conversion for the easier path, which is convert C++ object. As you are given the C++ object definition, and how do you actually write code to convert that to the JSON? So we're trying to do that for the first part. Okay. No, somebody asked SP. It should be, yeah, it should be 95602. Should be 65. Let me actually check the process. Okay, let me check the process. Hold on. You see, when I run it, the port number is 95602. Okay, for SP, that's the port number. I'm still running here. Okay. Any other question for homework 4? Before I stop recording, then we can answer other question. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.